You know, you spent, probably 400 hours mastering Adobe Illustrator,
Oh, easily.
right? Like, your Bezier curves are flawless, your anchor points are mathematically perfect, you export the file, you send it to the client, and you just feel like a genius.
Yeah, you feel untouchable in that moment.
Exactly. And then, 2 weeks later, you're driving down the highway and you see your beautiful minimalist logo printed on a massive billboard, except it's been stretched vertically by like 50%.
Oh no, the classic vertical stretch.
Yeah. And they've added a bevel and emboss effect, and like it's glowing with a neon green drop shadow. I mean, it is a designer's absolute worst nightmare.
It really is. And, it's the exact moment you realize that creating the art, the actual drawing, is only about 20% of the job.
Wait, only 20%?
Yeah, maybe less. The other 80% is building a fortress around that art so the client can't accidentally destroy it.
That is just such a harsh reality. Like stepping out of the theoretical world of pure graphic design and into, commercial execution. Because you have the raw talent and you can draw beautifully, but the bridge between learning a skill in a vacuum and actually handing off professional work to a client.
And actually getting paid your worth.
Yes, getting paid.
Yeah.
That bridge is incredibly murky. So if you are listening to this right now and you are just starting your career, or hey, even if you're a few years in and you're just struggling with clients constantly ruining your work, we are handing you the blueprint today.
We really are. We're doing a complete masterclass in the business and the execution of design.
It's basically the survival guide. We are moving from the solitary joy of making something look good into the highly structured architecture of how you present it, protect it, and price it.
And we've got the perfect source material for this.
We do. To do this, we are pulling the core concepts from an absolute must-read. We're doing a deep dive into Chapter 5 of the book, Principles of Logo Design.
Such a crucial chapter.
It is. I'm going to say right up front, if you are serious about this career, you need this resource on your desk. Again, the book is Principles of Logo Design.
You really can't skip this one.
No, you can't. And you can find it on Amazon using the link, https://amzn.24nt5e. In fact, you can buy the book right now by scanning the QR code of the book link provided in the description below.
Definitely go do that.
Yeah, because we are about to tear into the psychology of presenting work, the mechanics of bulletproof brand guidelines, the physics of real-world stationery.
The aggressive math of pricing your labor.
Oh, we are definitely getting into the math. And finally, the architecture of the physical room where you actually create, the design studio.
But we have to start at the moment of highest anxiety for literally any designer.
The presentation.
Exactly. You've done the work, you are sitting across from the CEO or the marketing director, and you have to reveal what you've made. And, the instinct for almost everyone is to go in with guns blazing.
Right, like full color, flashy animations, just a completely finished masterpiece.
Yeah, but this is where the industry standard completely contradicts what they teach you in art school.
Okay, lay it on us.
The rule for that initial presentation is that your designs should only be about 80% finalized.
Wait, 80, not 100.
Nope. 80%. And strictly, exclusively, they must be presented in grayscale. No color whatsoever.
Wow. I mean, it feels incredibly vulnerable to do that.
Yeah.
You feel kind of naked showing a black and white mark when you know how beautiful it looks in that custom gradient you built.
It's terrifying the first time you do it, but there is a deep psychological mechanism at play here. Color carries immense, uncontrollable emotional baggage.
Right. I want to dig into that baggage, actually, because I was thinking about this like a chef.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so it's like a chef bringing a patron into the kitchen to paste the underlying broth before the final heavy spices are added. Because if you serve the completely finished soup, and they happen to have like a genetic aversion to cilantro,
The whole dish is ruined in their mind.
exactly. They can't taste the hours you spent reducing that broth. They only taste the soapiness of the cilantro. So in design, color is the cilantro.
That is exactly how human perception works in a corporate setting. I mean, you might design the most structurally perfect logo for a tech startup, and you present it in a specific shade of, let's say, forest green.
Yeah, forest green.
But you don't know this. The CEO's bitter ex-business partner drives a car that exact shade of green.
Oh my gosh, of course.
Or their primary competitor just rebranded using a similar hue. The CEO's brain will instantly, subconsciously reject your design. They won't even see the brilliant geometric form you built. They will just feel a sense of unease.
Because of the color.
Right. By stripping the design down to grayscale, you are neutralizing that entire emotional minefield.
You're forcing them to look at the bones of the house before you let them argue about the paint in the living room.
That's a perfect way to put it. You are asking one simple question. Does this black and white shape communicate the core identity of your business?
And notice we said core identity, because at this 80% stage, you have to bring the client's focus away from trying to tell a massive, complex story.
Right, a logo cannot tell you the entire history and mission statement of a company. It is an identifier, not a novel.
Grayscale forces that simplicity. It proves whether the mark is strong enough to survive on its own.
Yeah, it has to work in black and white first.
Okay, so we are committed to the grayscale reveal, but how do we actually structure that meeting? Because you don't just attach a JPEG to an email and say, thoughts.
Oh, absolutely never do that.
Right, you have to build a highly curated experience. The industry standard is a very specific 3-slide anatomy for the presentation deck.
You are building a narrative of professionalism before they even see the artwork.
So slide 1, it sounds almost painfully basic, but it really sets the entire psychological tone. It includes the name of the company you are designing for, the names of all the designers on your team who touched the project, the official name of the project, and the date.
It establishes a formal legal record. This is from a title slide.
Yeah, it immediately shifts the dynamic in the room from, we're here to look at some cool art, to this is a serious business transaction, and this intellectual property is officially documented.
That makes total sense. Then we click to slide 2, and you still don't show the logo yet.
Nope, hold it back.
This is where you provide background on your studio and, critically, an overview of the strategic insights about the project. You are reminding the client of the specific problem they hired you to solve.
This is pure expectation management. If you skip slide 2, the client will judge the upcoming logos based on whatever mood they happen to be in that day.
Right, like if they had a bad commute, they're going to hate your design.
Exactly. But by anchoring the presentation to the agreed-upon research by saying, remember, we agreed this brand needs to appeal to a younger, mobile-first demographic while maintaining corporate trust, you are giving them the rubric to grade your work.
You are explicitly telling them how to judge you. And then, the grand reveal. Slide 3, the grayscale designs.
There we go. But here is the rule that I know absolutely terrifies junior designers. You must limit your presentation to exactly 3 concepts.
3 is the absolute maximum.
I have to play the voice, the terrified junior designer here, because if I'm listening to this right now, I'm thinking, wait, I just charged this client $5,000. I spent 2 weeks sketching. I generated 15 really distinct, cool directions.
It happens all the time.
Right, so I'm thinking, if I only show 3, they're gonna think I'm lazy. They're gonna think I'm holding out on them. Shouldn't I show them all 15 to prove I grinded for that paycheck?
It is the most common and honestly the most destructive beginner trap in the entire industry.
Really?
Yes, showing too many options does not communicate hard work. It communicates a profound lack of confidence.
Because it looks like you are asking them to do your job.
Precisely. If you dump 15 logos on a table, you are essentially saying, I don't actually know which of these solves your problem, so I need you, the non-designer, to act as the art director and figure it out for me.
Ouch. Yeah, that's not what they paid for.
No. They did not hire you to be a human rendering machine. They hired you to be the expert consultant. Your job is to generate 50 ideas in private, ruthlessly kill your own darlings, and present only the 3 absolute best solutions that you are willing to stand behind.
That reframing is massive.
Yeah.
Your job isn't to generate, your job is to curate.
Exactly.
But let's talk about how those 3 concepts actually look on slide 3. Because they aren't just floating in a white void, right? We have to use practical mock-ups.
Yes. Clients generally lack spatial imagination. If you show them a flat vector graphic on a screen, they cannot mentally translate that into what it will look like embroidered on a uniform or, embossed on a package.
So how many mock-ups do you need?
You have to bridge that gap by providing 5 to 6 contextual mock-ups for each of the 3 designs.
And the key word there is contextual.
Yeah.
Because if you are designing a brand for a local artisanal coffee house, you don't mock the logo up on a heavy piece of industrial gym equipment.
No, or a sleek sports car. That makes no sense.
Right. You put it on a textured paper cup, a canvas apron, a wooden sign.
We see a brilliant example of this contextual matching in the book with the MegaBridge cryptocurrency exchange platform.
Oh yeah, that was a great example.
The final logo is this thick, undulating, continuous M shape. It's very modern. But they didn't present it just as a flat icon. They mocked it up very cleanly on a premium white hoodie.
Which instantly communicates the lifestyle of the target demographic. You look at that hoodie and you think, okay, tech-forward, startup culture, modern wealth. It gives the logo a physical reality.
It grounds it.
But I do want to note a technical trap here.
Oh.
If you are showing 3 different logos, you have to keep the mock-up styles consistent across all 3 options.
Oh, this is vital. You need them comparing apples to apples.
Right, because if logo A is mocked up on a beautifully lit, moody, expensive laptop, and logo B is mocked up on a flat, brightly lit, cheap plastic pen.
They aren't going to choose logo A because it's a better design. They are going to choose it because the mock-up photo is subjectively cooler. You have to control the variables.
Okay, so the client deliberates. They review the 3 grayscale concepts in their perfect, consistent mock-ups, and they pick one. They approve the bones of the house. We have locked in the form.
We survived the grayscale gauntlet, and now we add the flesh.
Now, finally, we enter the coloring phase, and your strategy for picking the color isn't just opening a color wheel and picking your favorite shade of blue.
No, it requires intense competitor research. Your duty is to ensure your client's palette actively disrupts their specific market.
So if every other local bank in a 50-mile radius uses navy blue and gold,
You absolutely do not use navy blue and gold. You are looking for market differentiation. You want visual white space.
but what if the client is just really stubborn?
Well, there are times when a client has an immovable, irrational demand for a specific color. If they are signing the check and they demand red, you use red.
Right, you still have to get paid.
But because you already proved the form works in grayscale, navigating that color application is infinitely easier. The logo doesn't rely on the color to function. The color is just an enhancement at this point.
All right, so the color is approved. The client loves it. We are at the final handoff. You're ready to send the invoice and the final deliverables. What exactly goes into that ZIP file?
This is a great question.
Because I've seen designers send 30 different files, and I've seen designers send literally 1 JPEG. There has to be a definitive industry standard checklist.
There is. It's 5 mandatory file formats. The holy grail of deliverables.
5 files.
It covers every possible use case without creating a chaotic, overwhelming folder for the client.
Okay, so the 5 files are .ai, .eps, .pdf, a high-resolution .jpg, and a .png. If you are a young designer listening to this, write those down.
Memorize them.
But why those 5 specifically? Let's talk about the mechanics of what these files actually are.
Let's split them into vectors and rasters. The first 3, the .ai, .eep, .apes, and .pdf- are vector files.
Meaning they aren't made of pixels.
Exactly. Vectors are not made of pixels, they are mathematical equations. Points on a grid connected by lines and curves.
So that means you can scale them to the size of a postage stamp or the size of a football stadium, and they will never ever lose quality or get blurry.
That's the magic of vectors. Now, the .ai is the native Adobe Illustrator file. That's the raw source code.
You are handing over the keys to the car.
Exactly. The .eps, on the other hand, is the universal vector format. This is crucial because your client might hire a local sign maker 10 years from now who uses a completely different, outdated piece of vinyl cutting software.
And the .a file might not open for them.
Right, but an .eps file will open flawlessly on almost any vector machine in the world.
Okay, and the .pdf.
The .pdf is the accessible vector. The CEO can open it on their smartphone, see it perfectly, but a commercial printer can still extract the high-quality mathematical paths from it.
It's like the best of both worlds. And then we have the rasters, the .jpg and the .png. These are made of pixels. They're a fixed grid of colored squares.
Yes. The high-res .jpg is your standard workhorse for basic print documents or digital placement where you have a solid background.
But the .png is different.
The .png is arguably the file the client will use the most on a daily basis because it supports a transparent background.
Which is huge.
It allows them to overlay the logo onto a photograph on their website or drop it into a PowerPoint presentation without a big, ugly white box around it.
So you provide those 5 formats. You give them a folder with full color, a folder with pure black, and a folder with pure white. You get your check.
Sounds like a success.
But this is the exact moment where the nightmare scenario I described at the beginning of the deep dive happens. You give a client a .png with a transparent background, and it is basically a loaded weapon.
It really is.
If you don't give them a rule book, a bored marketing intern is going to get their hands on it, rotate it 15 degrees to make it look dynamic, and put a bevel effect on it.
Which brings us to phase 2, the most vital protective measure in commercial design, bulletproofing the brand through guidelines.
Brand books,
Ah.
style guides, whatever you want to call them. A lot of startups, especially those burning through initial seed money, don't even want to pay for brand guidelines.
They see it as an unnecessary expense.
Right. They think, we're a team of 4, we sit in the same room, we know what our logo looks like, just give us the file.
And, that works for about 3 months. But what happens when they hire a social media manager?
Yes.
What happens when they sponsor a local 5K race and have to send their logo to a third-party vendor who prints cheap t-shirts? The logo leaves the founder's hands and enters a decentralized ecosystem.
The classic disaster is a client taking a low-resolution 72dpi digital logo meant for a website header and sending it to a high-end stationary printer for their corporate letterhead.
Oh, I've seen that happen so many times. Because to a non-designer, a file is just a file.
Right, they just see the picture.
They don't understand that a web logo is optimized for a glowing screen, not for the physical absorption of ink into paper. The brand guidelines act as a manual of operations. It explicitly distinguishes between print and digital assets. It stops the client from unknowingly destroying their own visual equity.
So we have to build the manual. And the most critical section of this manual is the logo use guidelines. I absolutely love this section because it requires you to be a bit of a dictator.
You really do have to lay down the law.
It contains the do's and don'ts.
It's the legal framework for the geometry you created. Because it isn't just external vendors you have to worry about, it's in-house designers too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
If someone works for a corporation and they have to look at the same logo every single day for 3 years, they get bored.
They want to spice it up. They want to add a drop shadow or squash it to fit into a weird banner ad.
You have to build guardrails to protect them from themselves. There is a great visual example of this from the text, looking at the ACT Research Company guidelines.
Those guidelines are wonderfully strict.
They really are. It explicitly shows the logo and puts giant red X's over variations. It forbids outlining the logo. It forbids putting it inside a restrictive box. It forbids changing the colors, using a gradient blend tool, changing the angle, or putting a busy pattern inside the logo type.
You are telling the future designers of this company, you can be as creative as you want with the marketing campaigns, the photography, the copy, but the logo itself is sacred geometry. It is locked. Do not touch it.
Speaking of protecting that geometry, we have to talk about minimum sizes.
Yeah.
Because a logo looks incredibly majestic when it's taking up your entire 27-inch Retina display.
It looks flawless.
But what happens when that same logo has to be printed on the side of a plastic ballpoint pen?
It becomes a physics problem.
How so?
Well, ink spreads when it hits a surface, and pixels blur on low-resolution screens. If a logo is too complex, and you shrink it down to a few millimeters, the negative space fills in and it just becomes an illegible smudge.
And you can't just guess this number when you're writing the manual.
Yeah.
The process of determining minimum size is totally empirical.
You have to test it in the real world.
You literally take your design in the studio, you print it out at various microscopic sizes on a piece of paper, and you physically lean in and look at it to find the exact millimeter where it breaks down.
You are looking for the threshold of legibility. There's an example in the source material from the Georgia Made by Characters campaign for the Frankfurt Book Fair.
Oh, right, the one with the intricate marks.
Exactly. The designer had a primary mark with some really intricate internal details. They printed it out and found that at 3 millimeters, the ink bled together and the internal shapes just vanished.
So mathematically, the absolute minimum size allowed in the manual became 4 millimeters.
Yes. And you write that into the guidelines in stone. Never reproduce smaller than 4 millimeter. You take the guesswork away from the vendor printing the pens.
But it's not just about how small it can get. It's about how close other things can get to it. We need to talk about the exclusion zone.
Ah, the visual breathing room.
I used to think of the exclusion zone as just a polite boundary, but I actually think a better metaphor is acoustic foam.
Acoustic foam.
Yes.
Tell me more.
Yeah, so if you put a logo right next to a heavy, bold block of text on a poster, that text is visually screaming. It creates noise. The exclusion zone acts like acoustic foam around the logo, absorbing that visual noise so the logo can actually be seen and processed by the eye.
That makes total sense. If another element intrudes on that space, the visual hierarchy collapses.
But here is the critical technical trap that separates amateurs from professionals. An amateur will write in the guidelines. The exclusion zone is always 2 inches.
which is an absolute disaster.
Because fixed measurements don't scale.
Exactly. If the logo is printed on the tail of a Boeing 747, 2 inches of clear space is completely invisible.
And if the logo is on an Apple Watch screen,
2 inches is larger than the entire device.
right?
The exclusion zone must be a proportional mathematical equation. It must scale with the logo.
So how do you mathematically guarantee that in the guidelines?
You derive the measurement from the logo itself. You find a distinct structural element within the design, maybe the height of the letter E in the logo type, or the radius of a circle in the icon.
Okay, let's call that unit X.
Perfect. You then establish the rule. The exclusion zone is always equal to 1.5 times the height of X. So when the logo scales up to the size of a building, X scales up proportionally, and the empty space around the logo scales up perfectly with it.
It is mathematically self-sustaining.
It's bulletproof.
But let's look closer, like inside the logo itself. Then we can talk about kerning. This is the spacing between individual letters. And there's a massive illusion here, especially for people who rely entirely on software.
Oh, software trap.
The illusion is that when you select a font and type a word, the computer automatically spaces the letters perfectly.
And the computer is almost always wrong.
Really? Always?
Mostly. A computer spaces letters based on mathematical bounding boxes. It doesn't understand optical weight.
Right. I mean, if you type a classic, highly refined font like Helvetica, the kerning is usually pretty solid out of the box. But if you're using a custom, modern, or slightly quirky typeface for a brand name, mathematical spacing will create terrible optical gaps. A capital A next to a capital V creates a massive cavern of negative space compared to a capital H next to a capital I.
Because of the angles.
Exactly. The designer has to manually, optically adjust the space between every single letter so it feels even to the human eye.
Because just because a font looks fine at 12-point size in a paragraph doesn't mean it holds up when it becomes the primary identifier of a multinational corporation.
And the real-world stakes of this are actually terrifying. The book is an example of an online gambling site called EuropeBet. They were manufacturing a physical sign to go on top of their corporate headquarters. The sign was 65 feet long.
20 meters of typography mounted on steel framing in the sky.
Think about the physical engineering required for that. If your kerning is off by just 3 millimeters on your Illustrator artboard, when you blow that file up to 65 feet, that 3 millimeter mistake becomes a 2-foot gap between letters.
It looks disjointed, cheap, and structurally unbalanced, and you can't just CMDZ a steel sign that has been welded and bolted to a roof.
No, you definitely cannot. But because the designer had provided rigorous, mathematically scaled kerning conversions in the brand guidelines, the sign manufacturers had a perfect blueprint.
The guidelines literally saved a multi-$1,000 architectural signage project from looking like a cheap mistake.
That is why we say brand guidelines are not just theory. They are physical, financial risk mitigation.
Absolutely.
Okay, we have locked down the shape, the size, the spacing, and the acoustic foam around the logo. Now we have to build the world it lives in. We are moving into phase 3, the supporting cast.
Colors, typography, and grids.
And the heaviest hitter here is color. We established the primary color earlier, but the guidelines dictate how that color is reproduced across different mediums. You have to provide the color codes in 4 formats: CMYK, RGB, hex, and Pantone.
Because every medium renders color using completely different physics.
Right.
RGB is for glowing screens. Hex codes are how web browsers read RGB. But the physical print world is where things get really complicated, and this is where we have to talk about CMYK versus Pantone.
I want to break this down mechanically because a lot of clients don't understand why printing is so expensive.
It's true, they always push back on printing costs.
Right. So CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and key, which is black. When a standard printer prints a logo, it isn't printing a solid block of color. It is printing millions of microscopic dots of those 4 colors, overlapping each other to create an optical illusion of the target color.
Which introduces physical risk. The paper might be slightly too absorbent, the humidity in the print shop might be high.
Oh, humidity affects it.
Definitely. But mostly, the 4 printing plates might be microscopically misaligned. If the cyan plate is off by a fraction of a millimeter, your crisp logo suddenly has a blurry blue halo around it.
Which is why, if the client has the budget, the absolute gold standard is Pantone.
Pantone is a spot color. It is not an optical illusion made of tiny dots. It is a bucket of physically pre-mixed ink.
So it's just one color.
Yes. The printer buys a specific can of Pantone 300 Blue, pours it into the press, and it prints from a single, flawless plate. It is a solid flood of ink.
It is structurally superior. The color's cleaner, it won't have that dot pattern blur, it resists fading, and crucially, if the paper gets wet, it doesn't separate into yellow and magenta smears.
It remains exactly the color it is supposed to be, whether it's printed in New York or Tokyo.
Now, as a beginner, Pantone swatch books cost hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
But there is a technical workaround, right?
Yes, if you don't own the physical book, Adobe Illustrator has a built-in library where it will take your CMYK mix and mathematically convert it to the closest corresponding Pantone number.
That's a lifesaver.
It's a vital tool for young designers to provide top-tier value to clients without a massive upfront capital investment.
Okay, so we've got the primary color locked. What about the secondary palette? How many colors does a brand actually need? Because some massive corporations, like Chase Bank, basically exist on one color. That specific blue is everywhere. They don't need a rainbow.
A single color projects massive institutional authority, but a lot of modern brands need flexibility. The general rule is to provide 4 to 5 complementary secondary colors.
And how much are those used?
They are used sparingly, maybe 5 to 10% of a layout for buttons on a website, call-out boxes in a brochure, or graphic highlights.
But context dictates everything here. Let's look back at the Europe Babette gambling platform. When you look at their secondary palette in the guidelines, it is a massive, aggressive spectrum.
Vibrant neon greens, hot oranges, warning reds, deep purples.
Why so many?
Because of the functional reality of their product. An online casino has dozens of different games running simultaneously. They need to differentiate poker rooms from slot machines, highlight live bets, flash warning alerts, and celebrate wins. They need a vast array of high-visibility colors to manage user interface hierarchy without diluting the primary brand identity.
We've locked in the visual emotion with the palette, but the workhorse of any brand is the written word. This brings us to typography, and this was another moment where my beginner instincts were totally wrong.
How so?
If I spend weeks designing a beautiful, sweeping, custom, highly unique font for a company's logo, my immediate instinct is to use that exact same custom font for all their corporate documents. I want everything to match perfectly.
Oh, if you do that, you will induce physical migraines in anyone trying to read their annual report.
Exactly. The guidelines strongly mandate using a simple, neutral sans serif font for all corporate main body text. But why? Why do we abandon the beautiful custom font for the boring text?
It comes down to cognitive load and the anatomy of the human eye.
Biology.
Yes. A highly stylized logo font is designed to be read in bursts of 1 or 2 words. It is art. But when you are reading a 50-page legal contract or an invoice or a massive block of website copy, your eyes are making rapid, tiny movements called saccades.
Saccades, right.
If the font has sweeping flourishes, unusual X heights, or varying stroke widths, the brain has to work incredibly hard to decode the letters. Reading fatigue sets in almost instantly. A neutral sans serif gets out of the way. It allows the information to be absorbed effortlessly.
And beyond the biology of reading, there is a harsh financial reality to typography.
Oh, licensing.
Yes. If you choose a rare boutique font for a company's body text, the client has to legally license that font. If they have 1,000 employees who need to type documents in that font, they have to buy 1,000 commercial licenses.
You could cost some tens of thousands of dollars just to type memos.
By specifying a high-quality, widely available standard sans serif that is already native to most operating systems, you save them massive overhead.
You save the creative flair for the H1 and H2 headers, the large titles on posters or website hero sections. That's where you introduce a secondary branded typeface that creates contrast and hierarchy against the neutral body copy.
Speaking of hierarchy, how do we organize all this typography and color on a physical page? We have to build grids and graphic devices.
The skeleton of a layout.
The standard tool for this is Adobe InDesign, and you build your grids based on standard paper geometries like A4 US letter. But the masterclass advice here is highly specific. Square grid boxes are vastly superior to rectangular ones.
This is a mathematical truth of layout design.
Why? What is actually wrong with a rectangle?
It limits your versatility. A grid is a skeleton. If your foundational grid is made of rectangles, they have a directional bias. They pull the eye either horizontally or vertically.
I see.
But a perfect square offers a mathematically neutral framework. You can span elements across 3 squares horizontally or 2 squares vertically, and the underlying mathematical harmony remains perfectly balanced. It adapts to almost any layout challenge without fighting the designer.
And how does the logo interact with this grid? We use graphic devices. These are the visual shapes, like a colored block, a stylized frame, or a holding shape that the logo sits inside on a layout.
And the rule here is about aspect ratios.
Right. The ratio of the graphic device must mirror the ratio of the logo.
You cannot force a round peg into a square hole without creating visual tension.
The text shows the Georgian Railways guidelines. Their logo is distinctly horizontal, a wide icon next to a long line of text. Therefore, the graphic device they use, the colored block the logo lives inside, is also a wide rectangle. It harmonizes perfectly.
It feels natural.
But if you took that wide Georgian Railways logo and forced it into a perfect square graphic device, you would have massive, awkward, empty caverns of negative space on the top and bottom. It would look cramped on the sides and lost in the vertical space.
Every element must feel inevitable. The geometry of the holding shape must validate the geometry of the logo.
Okay, we have built an incredibly robust digital system. We have the presentation strategy, the vector files, the exclusion zones, the Pantone chemistry, the typography, and the grids. But up to this point, it has mostly been pixels in theory.
We need to make it real.
Let's pull this out of the computer. We're moving into phase 4, real-world application. Stationary.
The physical manifestation of the brand, the things you can actually touch.
Now, obviously, things like branded envelopes are dying out because of email, but there remains a holy trinity of print that businesses still desperately need: business cards, letterheads, and folders.
Let's start with the business card. It is arguably the most important 3.5 by 2 inches of real estate a brand owns.
And a cardinal rule here is less is more.
It is an exercise in extreme restraint.
The face of the card should be clinical. Name, title, phone number, email address. That is it.
Good luck getting a client to agree to just that.
Right. If you have ever worked with a client, you know this is where the fight happens. Because every client says, wait, where is the physical street address? We need our suite number on there and our fax number.
And you, as the expert, have to actively protect the hierarchy by telling them no.
You tell them to put a URL on the back. Physical addresses completely clutter the front of the card. And let's be honest about modern human behavior. Nobody types a physical address from a card into their GPS.
Never. They just search the company name on their phone.
It is redundant information that destroys the visual elegance. You keep the front pristine, and you use the back of the card for the primary brand color or a subtle brand pattern.
And then you have to manage the physical object itself, because the design on the screen doesn't matter if the physical execution is cheap.
The quality imperative is absolute. If a business card is printed on flimsy, thin, 14-point paper that bends in your wallet,
the recipient immediately subconsciously associates your entire company with cheapness and instability.
it is a tactile judgment. The business card is the one physical object the client will literally leave behind in a room after a meeting. It is their physical avatar when they are gone.
You have to advise clients to invest heavily here. Use thick, heavy paper stock like 32-point or higher. Use soft touch lamination or foil stamping or embossing.
There is an image in the book of a card for FEVR, a motion graphic studio. It is a thick, textured, dark gray card. And their logo is deeply embossed into the paper. There isn't even ink on the logo.
Wow.
It is just the physical shadow created by the deep impression in the heavy paper. It projects massive authority and permanence.
It tells the recipient, we are a substantial, successful entity.
Next in the trinity is letterheads. The main disaster here comes from the method of production. Companies always try to save money by printing their color letterhead shells internally on the office laser printer.
Office printers use dry toner, which sits on top of the paper and has a cheap sheen to it.
It just looks bad.
The colors will band, the alignment will shift by a few millimeters on every page, and it will look amateurish. The designer must mandate that the blank letterhead shells be mass-produced by a professional offset printing house, using the exact Pantone inks we discussed, so the corporate glue matches perfectly every single time.
And here's a structural rule that sounds obvious but gets violated constantly. Never print on the back of a letterhead.
People try to do it to save paper.
Right, but standard letterhead stock is relatively thin. If you print a bold logo or heavy text on the back, it will visually bleed through to the front. The person reading the actual letter will see this messy reverse ghost image behind the text.
Keep the back completely blank. Put extra information in the footer on the front if you must.
Finally, folders. And this offers a really fascinating look at the limits of a graphic designer's job versus a physical designer's job. When you design a folder, you aren't just placing a logo on a rectangle.
You are dictating the physical die cut of the object.
If you just send a logo to a printer, they will use their default, boring, generic folder template with standard pockets. But the true professional takes control of the physical geometry.
You provide the die cut lines.
If your brand is sharp, aggressive, and geometric, the pockets inside the folder shouldn't have soft, generic, swooping curves. The physical cuts of the paper must align with the visual geometry of the logo.
The physical architecture must match the digital architecture.
Okay, we have designed the logo in grayscale, locked it into mathematical exclusion zones, converted it to Pantone, and embossed it onto heavy paper. We have delivered massive, undeniable value to the client.
Which transitions us to the psychological gauntlet of the job.
You have to send the invoice. Let's talk about Phase 5, knowing your worth and the strategy of pricing.
This is where careers are truly made or lost. Not in Illustrator, but in the negotiation.
Let's address the beginner first. If I'm listening to this, and I'm a year into my career, how do I actually calculate a price?
The advice here is rooted in time and labor. You calculate a baseline base rate combined with an hourly rate.
So math.
Yes, you figure out what it costs you to live, you figure out exactly how many hours it takes you to research, sketch, and develop one strong concept, and you build a quote based on that math.
It is a functional formula for someone who is still figuring out their pacing.
But for an experienced designer, a veteran, the advice completely flips.
How so?
When you hit veteran status, the hourly model actually penalizes you for your own efficiency. You have to switch to flat, project-based rates.
Because if you are charging by the hour, you are incentivizing yourself to work slowly.
Exactly.
I want to play devil's advocate here. Let's say I'm a master designer. I've been doing this for 20 years. A client asks for a logo, and because I've solved this exact type of corporate identity problem 100 times, I sketch the perfect solution in my notebook in 10 minutes. I digitize it in an hour.
Okay.
If I charge them a flat rate of $10,000 for that logo, and they find out it only took me an hour, aren't they going to feel incredibly ripped off?
They might if they misunderstand what they're purchasing.
What are they purchasing?
They are not buying 60 minutes of your time. They are buying the 20 years of accumulated failure, learning, and mastery that allowed you to arrive at the perfect solution in 60 minutes instead of 60 days.
Wow.
A flat rate reflects the value of the outcome and the impact it will have on their business, not the duration of the labor required to execute the file.
Value versus time. It requires a massive shift in confidence. Now, what happens when a client simply does not have the budget? A local bakery cannot afford the same flat rate as a multinational tech conglomerate.
And pricing must fluctuate based on the client's scale, the risk, the exposure, and the usage rights scale up with the size of the corporation.
But what if it's a passion project? What if a brilliant tech startup approaches you, you love their mission, but they are completely broke?
You can take a lower rate, but you must establish a minimum baseline fee. You cannot race to the bottom because it devalues the entire industry.
However, there is a highly sophisticated, aggressive alternative if they can't meet your minimum.
You ask for equity.
You demand a piece of the company. I love this. It completely changes the dynamic. You are no longer a hired vendor, you are an investor.
You trade your high-level design labor, which they desperately need to look professional to venture capitalists, for a small percentage of equity.
Yes, most startups fail. But if you do this strategically over a decade, taking small stakes in promising companies, you can build a portfolio of passive income that dwarfs your standard design fees.
It is an investor mindset applied to graphic design.
But let's look at the other side of the coin.
Yeah.
Let's say the clients do have money. Here is the most actionable, stress-inducing piece of advice in the entire curriculum: the raise your rates stress test.
This is pure real-time market research.
Your rates should never be stagnant. The advice is that after every single successful project, you must try to increase your rate for the next client. Let me role-play the exact scenario they outlined because it's brilliant.
Go for it.
Let's say you are busy, you have 3 projects going, your rent is paid, you are financially secure for the month, the phone rings, a new client wants a logo.
You have zero desperation in this moment. You have total leverage.
Exactly. Normally you charge $3,000. This is the moment you take a deep breath, ignore your imposter syndrome, and quote them $6,000.
You double it.
You double it. And you wait for the response. If they gasp and say, absolutely not, we only have $2,000, you say, best of luck, and you hang up. You lost nothing because you were already busy.
But what if they say yes?
If they say yes without blinking, you have just permanently leveled up your income bracket.
Yeah.
You just discovered the true market ceiling of your value.
And it comes with a chilling realization. If clients are consistently eagerly agreeing to your prices without any hesitation or pushback, you are simply not charging enough.
You are leaving money on the table. A little friction during the negotiation is healthy.
It means you are finding the edge of your worth. And if you raise your rates and the higher paying workload becomes overwhelming, you don't lower your rates.
What do?
You use that extra revenue to hire junior designers to handle the sketching and concept generation while you maintain control of the final execution. You transition from a freelancer into a creative director. You build an agency.
Okay, so you took the risk, you raised your rates, the client said yes, they paid the massive flat fee, and the check clears. You are officially making real money. What should you do with that first massive paycheck?
You invest it directly back into the most intimate, critical part of the process. You build the physical environment where the ideas happen.
We are entering phase 6, the creative sanctuary, the design studio. The single best investment for your psychological health and your commercial output is a dedicated physical space.
Because true commercial creativity requires deep, sustained, uninterrupted concentration. You cannot do this work at the kitchen table while the television is on.
We are talking about literal neuroscience here. You have to build a space that your brain reflectively, Pavlovianly recognizes as a comfort zone meant only for creation.
When you walk through that door, your brain should automatically shift gears from everyday life into deep focus.
To achieve that neurological trigger, the curation of the room must be absolutely ruthless.
Oh, yeah. No compromises.
The rule is that the design studio cannot be full of meaningless, everyday objects. No mail, no laundry, no random clutter. It must be filled only with design objects.
You bring in your favorite drafting table, your favorite chair. Your shelves are filled only with reference books.
You immerse yourself so deeply that from every vantage point in the room, you are visually reinforced as a designer.
We see this visualized perfectly in the images of George Bokhua's studio. It isn't a sterile corporate office. It is intensely personal.
His library walls are packed tight with heavy volumes on typography and mid-century modernism. His painting table is covered in tape, clamps, acrylics, and brushes.
It looks chaotic, but it's a highly functional, purposeful chaos. It doesn't have to be a multi-million-dollar architectural space. It just has to be a space you claim entirely for the craft.
And within that curated space, you must have the specific tactile tools of the trade. Even in an industry dominated by glowing screens, the physical tools matter immensely.
The analog tools anchor you to the physical reality of the work.
There are 4 items a logo designer needs at arm's reach at all times: reliable pencils, a favorite sharpener, sketchbooks, and tracing paper. And the specific details required for these tools show such a deep, obsessive love for the craft.
Take the pencils, for example.
Right. You need pencils from a high-quality company that use consistent graphite so they don't scratch or tear the paper. But there is another specific requirement.
They must be made of good wood so that when you sharpen them, they literally smell good.
The smell of the cedar. It sounds romantic, but again, it is neuroscience. Engaging the olfactory senses with a specific, pleasant smell anchors you deeper into that psychological comfort zone. It triggers the creative state.
Then we have the sketchbooks. You need 2 distinct types. A lightweight, pocket-sized moleskin or field notes book that stays on your person at all times for capturing spontaneous ideas on the train.
And a much larger, heavier sketchbook that never leaves the studio desk for deep, complex geometric exploration.
But the most crucial technical recommendation regarding analog tools is the tracing paper.
Yes. As someone who spends most of their time in software, I was fascinated by the physics of tracing paper. The strict recommendation is that you must use a heavier stock tracing paper, specifically 100 grams. Why does the actual physical weight of a translucent piece of paper matter so much?
Because cheap, 60-gram tracing paper physically fails you during the process. If you are using a heavy 2B pencil and pressing hard to define a curve, thin paper will stretch, warp, or tear.
100-gram paper holds its structural integrity against heavy graphite.
Furthermore, when your desk is covered in sketches and you are shuffling papers around, thin paper crumples and creases permanently. 100-gram paper lies flat.
And there is a presentation aspect to this as well, right?
Absolutely. Eventually, you have to digitize that sketch, which means photographing it. Or you might want to include your raw analog process work in that slide 2 of the client presentation to show the human labor behind the logo.
If you photograph flimsy, wrinkled, translucent paper, it looks like garbage. The light refracts terribly.
A 100-gram paper lies perfectly flat under a camera lens, holds the deep black of the graphite beautifully, and presents your raw sketch as a premium piece of art.
Even the scrap paper have to look professional. You control the pencils, the paper, the smell of the room, and you've built your creativity home. What an incredible, exhaustive journey.
We covered a lot of ground.
We started in the terrifying, vulnerable position of showing a raw, 80% finished grayscale concept.
We learned to curate our ideas, presenting only 3 options to project absolute authority.
We learned the physics of CMYK versus Pantone ink, the optical illusions of typography kerning, and the necessity of acoustic foam exclusion zones.
We protected the art with a militant brand guideline document.
We manifested the brand into the real world with deeply embossed, heavy business cards. And we learned how to survive, financially transitioning from hourly labor to flat-rate value pricing, taking equity, and aggressively stress-testing our worth in the market.
And we ended in the meticulously curated sanctuary of the studio, surrounded by cedar shavings and 100-gram paper.
If we zoom out and look at this entire blueprint, it brings up a really fascinating paradox about what it actually means to be a professional creative. We spent all this time talking about building rigid boxes.
The mathematical grid is a box.
The exclusion zone is a box. The strict list of do's and don'ts is a box. The physical studio itself is a curated box. We are taught that design is boundless, free-flowing, artistic expression.
But the reality is that true commercial creativity is only unlocked when you have meticulously defined boundaries.
The rules are the architecture that allows the art to survive contact with reality.
Without the rules, the brand falls apart the second you hand over the .pn file.
But you know, it makes me think about the future. We spent this entire time talking about building these heavy PDF brand books to protect the logo from clients and bad vendors. But looking forward, say, 5 years from now, I wonder if the concept of a static PDF brand book is going to become obsolete.
Because of automation.
Because of AI. If I'm a client in 5 years, do I really want to read a 50-page PDF to figure out how to place my logo? Or will designers just hand over a custom-trained AI model of the brand?
Oh, that's interesting.
You just type, put my logo on a blue background, and the AI intrinsically knows the exact Pantone blue, the exact mathematical exclusion zone, and physically will not allow the marketing intern to generate a design that violates the geometry. The AI becomes the guardrail.
The ultimate enforcement of the rules. The designer programs the physics of the brand, and the AI ensures no one can ever break them. It's a fascinating evolution of the exact principles we've discussed.
It means the rules we learn today are going to become even more important, because you will have to program them into the machine.
Exactly.
If you are listening to this and you want to master those rules so you can build those systems, whether it's on paper or in code, we explicitly request you to follow us right now for more technical design breakdowns and career-building content. Hit that follow button on your app.
The landscape is shifting quickly, and you need the blueprint to survive it.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. You came in knowing how to draw Bezier curves. You are leaving knowing how to build, protect, and price a commercial system. Armed with this knowledge, you're ready to stop just making pretty pictures and start tuning your raw talent into a sustainable, highly respected professional reality. We'll see you next time.